Hello, I'm Michael Voris.
And I'm Father Pablo, Catholic missionary priest. We really want you to watch every week the one true faith. Had you left that one true faith, please come home. We're waiting for you because we love you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The One True Faith, the show that we say is the most disturbing hour on television. Now, our topic today is how Catholics have been betrayed and continue to be betrayed by the very people responsible for educating them about the faith. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'll tell you in a little bit. But this problem is now so widespread that it's hard to know exactly where to even begin talking about it, much less how to actually solve the problem. Now, one thing is certain, that there are lots of people, see my glue and my happy face here? There are lots of people who really are missing out on the beauty of church teaching. As a matter of fact, the last 2 generations of Catholics have missed out on the beauty of church teaching. The truth is not being transmitted the way it should be, has not been for the last probably 2 generations, roughly 40 years or so. You can look around and see the effects of very poor education in the Catholic Church. The way you can see this is just by taking a look at how Catholics live their faith, or more to the point, how they don't live their faith. It is certain that a majority of Catholics today simply don't live their faith the way they're supposed to because they don't know the faith the way they're supposed to. They are ignorant of the most basic teachings of the Catholic Church. Participation in the sacramental life of the Church is virtually non-existent. Understanding of church teachings is more of a dream than it is a reality. Identification with the faith is much more cultural now today than it has been in probably the entire history of the Church. It's been reduced to the stuff of sort of late-night comedy skits on the network late-night comedy shows. Now, while there are many causes contributing to the meltdown of the faith in the Western world, there is one cause that simply cannot be ignored, and that is the near total failure of the Catholic education system to transmit even the most rudimentary basics of the faith. And the failure of the Catholic education system can in fact be singled out as probably the most significant reason why the Catholic Church is crumbling to pieces in the West and the faith is collapsing. All levels of education can take responsibility in this, from grade school to middle school to high school to college to postgraduate studies. And if you haven't been going through formal Catholic education, move over to CCD, Rcia. Not one level of Catholic education has not been ravaged by horrible, horrible catechesis and watered-down, weak-kneed theology. Now, we're going to talk about some specific examples just to sort of frame our conversation, but it is certainly not limited to these few examples we're going to be talking about. They're worth highlighting so we can expand on a larger problem. Since I'm most familiar with my own particular situation, I'll use some cases from my own life. I went to Catholic school from first grade through graduating from Notre Dame. 16 years of Catholic education, unbroken, except when I got in trouble at Notre Dame. It was a little broken then. My stops included schools in California and Texas, good number of different schools. And I have to tell you that with the exception of a couple of teachers here and there, my formal Catholic education in schools was miserable, absolutely miserable. Second grade, First Holy Communion, was actually one of the highlights of it. And third grade as well, with a wonderful, lovely nun named Sister Bernadette. When I was prepared for First Holy Communion in 1968, we actually had to go to confession first. Imagine that. That may come as a shock to anybody born after 1970, that you actually have to go to confession. You know what? Because they wanted to instill in us the idea that, we sin, and sin is a bad thing, and the Eucharist is Jesus, and we should be in as pure a state as we can possibly be before we go receive Jesus. People don't hear that anymore. Little kids don't hear that anymore. I've had parents say to me, well, Father such and Sister such and Deacon such said, well, these little 7-year-olds don't sin. These little 8-year-olds don't sin. Ask their parents if they don't sin. Third grade, like I said, I had a wonderful nun named Sister Bernadette. And boy, she was old school. She was old school. You did not get out of that class without knowing exactly what she was saying and what the church taught about something obviously age appropriate. From there on out, however, you got to say, it's pretty much downhill. I had one exception. There was a nun in 7th grade who was there for part of the year. Her name was Sister Frances. She was another lovely, faithful nun. Sister Bernadette, I'm sure, is in the arms of God right now. God rest her soul. And I'm going to guess that Sister Frances is as well. And if she's not, God rest her soul when she gets there. But I have to tell you, by the time the 1970s dawned, religion classes had been replaced by arts and crafts. Sort of arts and crafts like this. See, we used to cut out people's faces, make little happy faces of people, just like this. We'd make little collages of them, glue them all over the place, slap them on, and we learned all kinds of wonderful things like the Holy Spirit is a butterfly, and he's our friend because he's really pretty, and we'd put it on, and we'd glue them on and stick them there, and we'd walk, and we'd get done, and we'd have wonderful little collage-y posters, just like this. Does this look familiar? Does this look familiar? Now, this should look familiar for anybody who's gone through Catholic education in, well, what, the last 35 years maybe? Remember that? You used to make Jesus and, the little butter. See how happy everybody is? Because that's what the faith is. Everybody's sitting around being happy. Look on here, you won't see a cross anywhere. But, it's wonderful. This is what the faith was. This is how the faith's been taught. And in case you really didn't have any know what to do. Remember that story about Jesus' garment, the hem, the lady reaching out for it? Well, how do we show that in religion class post-Vatican II? We put a bunch of glue on the bottom of Jesus' garment, and we use lots of glitter, and we shake it off, and all of a sudden, now Jesus has a nice shiny hem. And I've learned all kinds of wonderful things because of Jesus' hem and the glitter. It's wonderful. Do you remember? Do you remember when we used to learn about going to Mass? What did we do in Mass? Well, we didn't learn very much about Mass, but we sure learned that felt and made wonderful, remember the banners? Is this ringing a bell with anybody? Remember this? We made collages, we made banners, we made posters, we cut out people's happy faces, we put them all over, because this is what the faith handed down to us through the apostles from Jesus Christ himself got reduced to. A bunch of poster board and glitter and felt and silly little letters and words that nobody who was making these had any idea what they meant. Nobody. We learned that we were told to bring these into Mass. We used to process these into Mass. We had all kinds of new songs on guitars about holding hands and loving each other. No one ever told us what love was. We'd go to Mass and nobody ever told us what Mass was. We learned a whole lot, a whole bunch of new songs, like I said, but we never learned any of these meanings. We learned about peace. Everything's peace. Oh, so what's peace? Let's have peace with everybody. No one ever told us that peace isn't the absence of war, but it's a fruit of being in love with God. You never heard that, ever, anywhere. In high school, now high school, of course, our minds were able to absorb so much more. We didn't have to sit and play with poster boards and felt anymore, at least not past freshman year. But, yes, you heard right, poster boards freshman year. But, in high school, we never learned anything about theology. Heck, forget about theology. We never learned anything about logic or even the most basic catechism. We plunged right into incredibly heady topics that asked us to write papers about how we felt about certain ethical situations. Remember those? Your feelings. How do you feel? Remember that? Feel had to be the most overused word in religion class for my entire high school career. And I went to 2 different Catholic high schools and nothing changed. Same thing. How do you feel? How do you feel? My parents weren't paying lots of money for both my brother and I, who also had 16 years of Catholic education, and making all kinds of sacrifices to pay those bills so that we could sit down and write papers about how we felt. My parents didn't know, and of course we didn't know as students to go home and say, hey, Mom, Dad, they're teaching us silly stuff. What did you learn in school? I love Jesus. I learned Jesus loved us. Oh, well, they're teaching what? That's good. That's good. Well, I didn't learned and loved us like this. But this is what we got. This is what we got. And if you went to Catholic school or CCD or any of those things, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This was the catechism for 50 years, 45 years. This has been it. Now, we weren't taught much at all. What we were taught was actually more destructive than if somebody had not taught us anything at all. You know, when you've got a young, impressionable mind and you start pouring junk into it, that down the road, that junk is going to create all kinds of problems, let me tell you, it's probably better to hear nothing than to hear something bad. We got these ridiculous textbooks. What a waste of money. What a waste of money. You'd flip through page after page, and all you would see are the poster boys, the poster girls. That's all you'd see. People being smiley and having picnics. There's never a picture of a saint. There was never a picture of a pope, never any church history, nothing. It was like going through a journal of, what did some Americans think about God and how did they feel about him. This was religion class. I remember sophomore year, I had one class where the entire religion class, the whole first semester, was a 5-step problem-solving process. That's what we talked about. For whatever your first semester is, 4 months? 4 months, we had to memorize 5 steps to solving a problem. Had nothing to do with religion, but boy, can I solve a problem. I can solve a problem here like nobody's. But nowhere in this 12 years of Catholic education did I ever hear about the cardinal virtues, the theological virtues, the precepts of the church, the corporal works of mercy, the spiritual works of mercy. But I'll tell you one thing, I sure could put a poster together. You need a banner? You need a banner? I'm your man. Come to me. Voris banners right here. Religion class got replaced with arts and crafts. What an absolute waste of my parents' money. What an absolute waste of my parents' money and tons of others' parents' money. Particularly our age group, like in the 40s, we were sort of the first wave to get rolled over by this stuff, and parents were probably very unsuspecting about this. My suggestion would be, if there was a way to file a class action suit, this ought to make me very popular. If there was a way to file a class action suit, parents should go back and sue the diocese and sue the religious orders for false advertising because they sent their children to Catholic schools so that their Catholic students would learn the Catholic faith, and the schools didn't teach it and the kids didn't learn it. And you should go back and sue for your money. And in case somebody thinks this is just Michael Voris going off on a rant, I have some good company with me. Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen famously said that if you want your kids to lose their faith, send them to Catholic schools. Is that not a horrible condemnation coming from a man who is most likely a saint? If you want your kids to lose their faith, send them to Catholic school. A priest that I know, a very good priest, said very forthrightly, Catholic schools have done a fine job of passing on everything except the faith. The worldly education is tremendous. I'll say that. I got a great leg up. I got to go to Notre Dame because I had a wonderful education in school. I knew my calculus and all that stuff that I hate now and would never want to go back again. But I knew it then. I knew it just enough to get into Notre Dame and I forgot it all. But I didn't know enough to be able to sit in a class in religion at Notre Dame and have the slightest idea what was being said to me was just goofy. I went on a retreat in high school once where we did almost nothing except play games. We played games like holy volleyball, holy basketball, holy tiddlywinks, but we did nothing that I remember about religion. We did sit around in a bunch of small groups. There's a term I love, small groups. Oh, so let's break into small groups so we can all discuss our feelings. And that's what we did. We discussed our feelings. A bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds sitting around discussing feelings. 14 and 15-year-olds don't have feelings. They're not old enough to have feelings yet. Certainly nothing that needs interior exploration when you're on a religious retreat. I didn't even know how to say the word exploration when I was 14. Father Pablo Straub, he's a great friend of us. Many of you may know him, the Redemptorist priest. He's a missionary, wonderful, saintly man. He's a great friend of ours here. He has said numerous times that once liberals take charge, all the fun and games begin. And boy, was he right and still is right. A short while later, after high school, there I was at Notre Dame and sitting in classes, and here's what I was hearing at a university dedicated and named after the Mother of God. I was hearing that the church was wrong on birth control, that some of the saints, if not all of them, were mentally disturbed. There I knew something was wrong when he said that. I'm like, really? What do you mean? He said St. Catherine of Siena was kind of whacked out. She was still probably a nice lady, but she was mentally disturbed and had deep psychological issues. In a religion class at Notre Dame, my sophomore year. I also heard in another class that the Pope should be considered in your moral choices, but you certainly don't have to listen to much to what he says any more than anybody else telling you something. He's a good man. He's a good man, but you don't really have to listen to him more than anybody else. Make up your own mind. That's what I heard. We also heard that premarital sex was okay if you loved the other person at a university named after the Mother of God. I sat in the front row of a chemistry class my freshman year during the 1980 election campaign, and Father Ted Hesburgh, the icon of liberal Catholic education, who signed my diploma, came into that class and said that abortion was bad, but it was not the first thing we should be thinking about when it comes to morality and voting. That was almost 30 years ago. See how long this stuff has been going on. He was as close to me as you were because I was sitting in the front row. And here he was, white-maned, Father Hesburgh, telling us that abortion was just one thing among many. Among many. I wonder if he'd have thought that if his mother would have aborted him. Now, while these are my personal experiences, I have to say that I wasn't the only one present. There were other kids sitting in the classes that heard them too. And I'm also willing to bet, based on everybody else's sort of head recognition and head nodding, that the classes I was in weren't the only classes these things were being said in either. I suspect whole classes of people were hearing this mockery of the faith. In high school, a religion teacher, who we later found out was a lesbian, was praising, at the time, what was the new technology of in vitro fertilization. She was praising it. She never mentioned that in the course of in vitro fertilization, other human beings are destroyed, and she never even bothered to consider that the church condemned it. Never a word, nothing, zero. Now, we decided to produce this segment of the One True Faith and call it Catholic Traitors because of a discussion I had with a couple of young women who had gone through some Catholic education. They'd been through a CCD at a local parish here. I asked them what single most important aspect or teaching about the faith had they learned in 8 years of CCD. I just wanted to know. You hear all this stuff all the time about, the young people, the John Paul, the this, the young. I said, well, okay, here's some young people. Here's an entire generation separating them from me. So I said, let's see if there's been a change in the generation. So I said, what's the single most important thing that you can recall to mind about what you heard? Neither one of them had any answer for me. 8 years of Catholic CCD, they couldn't tell me anything. They're preparing for the sacrament of confirmation. The only answer that one of the young women, they were, I think it's 18 and 19 if I remember their ages correctly, the only answer that one of them could give me was that Jesus loved us and that the glitter was sticky. That was the answer. That's pathetic. The other young woman learned how to make an Advent wreath. 8 years of Catholic education, she learned how to make an Advent wreath. When I asked her what Advent was and why it was important, that's the answer I got. It's because before Christmas? It's atrocious. Another case, this one from a Catholic high school, is of a young girl, so we've gone through the entire high school, was raised Catholic, but during her time in that school, she became a Buddhist. She's not alone. A clear majority of teens in the school, as I hear this from teens in that school who come up and tell me, a clear majority support abortion, and many of them admit to being sexually active. In some cases, their parents know it. In other cases, their parents don't. And I'm sure this school is not alone. Most Catholic high school kids don't go to Mass unless they have to. Next time you're in Mass on a Sunday, Look around and count on your one hand the number of high school kids who are in Mass. One hand. Unless they're standing there with their parents, you won't see them. Unless it's some kind of weird Mass that has all kinds of crazy music and rock bands and everything else, which by the time they're done being there is virtually like not being at Mass at all, because all they hear is let's dance around and sing and have songs and hold hands and wave and listen to the music and clap and cheer. That's a concert, folks. That's not Mass. Now, when we come back, we're going to continue on this vein, and we're going to talk about how this has penetrated up to higher levels in the church and what's being done about it, if anything. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the One True Faith. We're just a little trip down memory lane here and still making our little poster board. You know, Jesus loves all these people here, so we're just making sure everybody understands that. At another high school, there was a recent assignment in religion class where the assignment was write a paper, this is to high school sophomores, write a paper on which teachings of the church you disagree with and what you would do to change them. Isn't that wonderful? You know, I just love involving all the people. It's nice to know how inclusive we are these days. No more guilt, no more sin. Gosh, we've come such a long way since Jesus, haven't we? Now, I haven't mentioned the name of this school, this particular school, because I don't want to focus on it, because it isn't the problem. What goes on in it goes on in tons of Catholic schools all over the country. They wonder why they're closing down, huh? You know what? Because you can go pay $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 a year in tuition and get a much better secular education, and quite frankly, you should. At least your kids aren't going to have their minds polluted, or rather their souls polluted. Now, give you another example here. What happens to these kids after they leave? Well, you don't see them at Mass. If they graduate from high school, you don't see these kids at Mass. A bunch of us were out to dinner one night, some friends, and we were talking about theology, go figure, and a waiter, he was probably, I think he told us eventually he was like 23 or 24. He was sort of overhearing the conversation. He was our waiter, and he kept sort of coming back and, you know, kind of taking an extra amount of time to like pick up the dishes and all this, and he was listening. And he said to us at one point, he said, hey, I'm just sort of listening to your conversation. He kind of joined in, you know, when he could. He had a bunch of tables to take care of, but he was hanging around us as much as he could. And he said he really enjoyed the conversation. He didn't hear much things like that very often. You know, it was usually just whatever, talk about other stuff. But next time you're out to dinner, by the way, remember the waiters have ears. And mouths. So he hung around, and he sort of pulled up a chair when all of his work had died down for the night. And he visited with us for like 10 minutes or so. And he told us he'd gone to Catholic high school, a local one here, and had and didn't believe anything about the church anymore. This is about probably 4 or 5 years out of high school. He now he'd read a lot of spiritualism stuff from the Far East, and now was confirmed in that, believed that, and didn't believe anything the Catholic Church taught. It was interesting that as we talked to him and said, well, what about this one? And started challenging his sort of basic assumptions about the church, he kept getting quieter and quieter and quieter, and finally started resorting to saying, well, I didn't know that. Well, I hadn't heard, really? Well, that's not what they told us. Well, I hadn't heard that. And finally his conversation turned into that, just I don't know. I never heard that. That's pathetic. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. This is a soul being destroyed at a Catholic school. It's a victim of somebody else's agenda because that person or that committee or that theology department has their own personal bones to pick with the church, and they'll pick those bones over the soul of the students entrusted to them. Now, we can go on with this list of casualties forever. I'm sure there's not a Catholic around, a good, faithful Catholic around, who doesn't know dozens, maybe hundreds of these stories. But the problem is that it's not being seriously addressed. Even today, those 2 girls that I spoke with, those 2 young women, had just left this program not 6 or 8 months earlier. It's still not being addressed. Nothing's being done to fix this. Little quarters here and there, but where the problems are remaining. And they're getting bigger and bigger. It's ridiculous. You know, the situation's gone on for so long that children who were not taught the faith have now grown up, become parents themselves, and are sending their children into these situations where they're not hearing the faith. Had I known when I was 10, 12, 13 that all this stuff was weird, I could have gone home to my parents and said, hey, Mommy, Daddy, guess what? I heard that, maybe I didn't call them Mommy at 13, but I could go home and say, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm shaving now. There is sister such and such said blah, blah, or brother such and such said this or that. I can imagine that in probably that amount of time, my mom or dad would have been on the phone. What are you telling my son in religion class? But now, a whole generation later, the kids don't know that what's being told to them is wrong. And if the kids went home and told the parents wouldn't know it was wrong. It's so long has the problem gone on now that people don't know that what they're hearing isn't the truth anymore. You go to a Catholic school and you expect you're going to get Catholic teaching. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, unless you know what goes on in most Catholic schools today, and then it is an unreasonable expectation. Now, if your child grows up, gets out of high school, goes on to college, you send them on to college, a Catholic college or university, watch out. Their first class could be Atheism or Agnosticism 101. Catholic college kids are routinely subjected to a barrage of anti-Catholic venom in theology classes taught by atheists or non-Catholics. This is par for the course because the heretical mindset that has taken over on an institutional level in many different aspects of the church's life has nestled in and become encrusted in Catholic higher education. Sometimes it's a priest or a nun with an axe to grind, but it's almost always at least a professor who disagrees with church teaching. And generally, I think it's a pretty safe assumption, the reason they disagree with the church teaching is because they disagree with it in their own life. They don't want to do this or do that. So they're going to get up and try to do a safety in numbers thing and get everybody to think like them. They're wolves. They're wolves attacking the sheep. I was back at Notre Dame for my 25-year reunion this past summer. And again, I do this a lot. I see how things are, talk to people about the faith. It's what I do. It's my job. So there are a bunch of students staying behind on campus. There's always thousands of alumni that come back every summer for reunions. So I'm back for my 25-year reunion. And a bunch of students were sitting there. And I started talking to them. And I said, hey, so I just kind of want to, what did you guys learn in theology class here? Did you have to take 2 semesters of theology. What did you learn? What did you think? And it was like on a college level. It was right back to this again, on a college level. At Notre Dame. At Notre Dame. None of them went to Mass regularly at Notre Dame. And let me tell you, at Notre Dame, every dorm has a chapel in it. On Sundays, you can go to Mass starting at 6 in the morning until 11:30 at night, every hour, on the hour, and that doesn't include the big basilica on campus in which there are 3 Masses upstairs and 2 Masses on bottom in the crypt. There must be 25 or 30 Masses you can go to at Notre Dame on a Sunday. And none of these students sitting in front of me, and they were all Catholic, and they'd all gone to Catholic school, they'd done the whole thing, not one of them went to Mass on a regular Sunday basis. The one girl told me, well, I go to Mass when my friends go because I like going because we all go together as friends. That's what we used to do when we'd go to the bar. That was not our mindset going to Mass. They were about as wishy-washy about church teaching as you could imagine. You ask them something about premarital sex, church is wrong about that. They have to understand, this is the 21st century. This isn't like the 8th century anymore. They were wrong about abortion. Now, some of them were pro-life, but if you pushed them to rape or incest, well, okay, I guess it's okay then. At Notre Dame. Contraception? Pfft. What, you're old fat? What do you mean you're not on the pill? Of the girls sitting in front of me, over half of them admitted to me that they were on the pill and they didn't think there was anything wrong with it. At Notre Dame. Homosexuality, hey, these people need to be treated fair too. Why shouldn't they be allowed to be married? At Notre Dame. Women being priests, absolutely. It's a matter of justice. The Pope said that this can't. He's got to get up to the times. He's got to catch up. At Notre Dame. My heart was busting inside because that's my school. So, many of the staff here won't be surprised at this, but I wound up spending an all-nighter with this group of students. And we sat there and we talked theology and philosophy and logic, and this went on until almost 7:30 in the morning on Sunday morning, and sort of Saturday morning. Kind of ruined the rest of my my reunion, but that's okay. We didn't get into anything complicated. I sort of thought that this level of discourse would be something that juniors and seniors at Notre Dame should be able to kind of adjust to and understand. And no, I just never heard any of this stuff. I thought kids at Notre Dame would know something of this material, and they knew nothing. About 6 or 7 hours went by or so, maybe 8 hours actually. One of them told me as you kind of saw the light bulb go on with her, and she started getting like visibly agitated or something, and I said, and I thought she was like getting angry about what I was saying. She told me a little bit later what she was getting angry about was that she'd been there for 4 years because she'd just graduated 3 weeks before, and she was angry that she'd never heard this in 4 years at Notre Dame. She was getting angry about it, and she should get angry about it, and we should all be angry about this. We should all be like scathingly, like insane angry about this, because this is souls. We're talking about souls here. None of them, in all of the different religion classes they'd taken, every one of them had taken the mandatory world religions class. You know what class that is? That's where you learn that all religions are the same. And everybody must take that class. Then you can take another class. You have to take one more class of your choosing. You can also take more theology classes. A couple of them had, because they thought it was interesting. They didn't think it had anything to do with the salvation of their souls, but they thought the topics were interesting. None of them had read St. Augustine. One of them looked at me like I had 4 heads when I said St. Thomas Aquinas. He goes, "Who?" I said, "Thomas Aquinas." You went to Notre Dame for 4 years and you never ever heard the name Thomas Aquinas? No. What about him? Wow. At Notre Dame. They'd never even read any of John Paul's writings. Probably the most written pope in the history of the church, or pretty darn close. And they'd never even read one word in class of his writings. Now, another said, that she liked going to Mass because she was going there with her friends, and they decided, oh well, this is a fun thing to do, let's go. They'd heard something about the real presence. That rang a bell with one of them, but he couldn't exactly remember what it meant. And as I talked to him about it, he said, "Oh that's a symbol for Jesus, right? Like the Last Supper at Notre Dame." At Notre Dame. They said they'd had absolutely no preparation in high school for the kind of classes that they wound up getting at Notre Dame. And I asked them the question, why? What were you studying in high school? And you could have taken the breath out of my body. We made collages in high school. That was his answer. In high school, at least we didn't make them in high school. We made them in 6th grade. We made collages in high school. The devastation that the Catholic education system has gone through is not limited to the formal areas of education. Actual going to classrooms and schools. Rcia programs all over America are an absolute disaster. They're an absolute disaster. They're little more than just sort of a rehash of different people's personal agendas. And in one essence, they're sort of a joke. A friend of mine had just gone through a RCIA program, and less than 2 months after coming out of the program and coming into the church, she was talking about her and her husband having a baby in vitro fertilization. And I said, this was a few years ago, and I didn't really know enough to how extensive the damage is in the church. But I did know that it was wrong, and so I said to her, you can't do that. That kills, other babies are killed in that process. That's how it's done. You mix all the sperm and eggs together, and you take 2 or 3 or 4, whatever you think are the best. The others you flush, or now they probably use for research. And the others you implant, and then you kill 1 or 2 of them, and that's how it's done. You're killing human beings. And she said, I never heard that. Never heard about that in RCIA. I'm like, well, what did you hear? I heard Jesus loves me. I heard Jesus loves me. Heard all about peace. Heard how war is a bad thing. Never heard a word about war on unborn children, though. So what's the big picture here? There's a generation of parents who have been betrayed by Catholic educators. And now there's a generation of students on top of their parents who have likewise been betrayed by Catholic educators. These parents are sending their children to Catholic schools and programs where they learn nothing about Jesus Christ. They learn nothing about the faith. They learn nothing about what Jesus Christ, our blessed Lord, came to earth to do. They hear nothing. In fact, they're being taught things that it's probably better they didn't hear at all. Stop sending them to schools that are polluting their minds and distorting them and making them lose their souls. It's disgusting and it's disgraceful. Many of these people then go on to hear and discuss things at Catholic colleges, where they get the same garbage regurgitated to them again. Catholic college professors everywhere. Church is wrong here, church is wrong there. When you get done, the church is essentially wrong with everything. It's a nice place to have a party. You want to bring your little child along for baptism? Hey, we'll have a great little baptism party afterwards. We'll have a great confirmation party. Hey, First Holy Communion, write a check for $25, $50, $100, pass on. That's it. And that's it. And the second they get old enough to drive, you never see them in the church again. This is education? This is education? Georgetown University openly supports pro-abortion and pro-homosexual student groups. Openly. And if you're a pro-life group on campus trying to get official university support, good luck, because you won't get it. Fordham University in New York honors a U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Stephen Breyer, personally responsible for the deaths of millions of babies. And they give this guy an award at Catholic Fordham University. St. Louis University gives platform after platform to pro-abortion Catholics. Notre Dame keeps allowing the presentation of a disgusting play called the Vagina Monologues. Every year they go through this big soul-searching academic freedom versus church teachings of the church interior struggle every year. And every year they allow the Queer Film Festival to play on South Quad so students can be exposed and open and try to understand all points of view. It's lies, it's filth, it's from Satan. All of it is from Satan. To young minds in college who have never heard the truth, have never heard accurate teaching, they are confirmed in their fallacies that they got when they were making poster boards and banners. They're confirmed in that. Now, church leaders who stand around wondering why churches are empty puzzle me. What are you wondering about? What are you wondering about? They come up with clever-sounding marketing schemes to get people to come back, catchy little phrases every Lent. Come back, come home, welcome home. Welcome home to what? You drove them out with your garbage. You never told them anything to begin with. What do you expect they're going to come back to? And if they come back, what are they coming back to? More pablum, more dispassioned preaching from the pulpits that would cure insomnia. It's disgusting what they've let the church become and poured this into the minds of the young people. This is betrayal and treason of the highest order. The first instruction our Lord gave his disciples was to go out and teach. And they do not teach, they pollute. And they sit on this cesspool of pollution and let people's minds become corrupted and their souls head to hell. Now, I don't pretend to know why this happens. I don't know if it's cowardice. I don't know if it's being afraid of what people will say. I don't know if they're afraid they get up and say something and people will stop giving money because they disagree with them. Yeah, you know what? After 40 or 45 years of polluting people's minds with lies, you tell them the truth, you bet they're going to rebel. But that's not your business. If you're a church leader, and I don't care where you are, in that whole structure, if you're a religion teacher, a religious ed teacher, a director of religious ed, Rcia, a school, whatever it is, your responsibility is to teach the truth of Jesus Christ and let the chips fall where they may. Millions, probably tens of millions of youth have been deprived of the splendor of the truth. They've been deprived because traitors would not share it with them. And what's the result? Their lives are a wreck. They contemplate suicide. They run around and have sex. They debase themselves. They have psychological problems left. They don't see themselves as anything good. They think their lives are worthless, so they engage more. And they don't know that there's an answer and a way out of it. And I'll tell you one thing, if I was a person having to stand in front of Almighty God and account for this and have these people's souls on my hands, I don't know where I would look, but I sure know where I'd wind up throwing myself. There is a price for treason in this life, and it's death. I can't imagine that the price for being a traitor about the faith and the teachings of Jesus Christ isn't eternal death. Whatever is holding you back, if you're a teacher of the faith, you don't be afraid to say it. Our blessed Lord himself said, "Do not fear him who can destroy the body, but fear him who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna." You have a responsibility, you live up to it. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to The One True Faith. We're talking about Catholic traitors, meaning the Catholic education system, which has been a near failure for passing on the faith. This is the part where we talk about questions and answers from our studio audience. Good evening, sir. What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Kevin. I'm from Harrison Township.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Hi. Doing fine.
What's your question?
Question is, what can common lay folks do to begin to retake our Catholic education system? Or any simple strategies we can begin to implement?
As I said to John earlier, the very first thing to do is we have to know the faith. Every one of us must know the faith. We must know the faith, first of all, because we want to know the faith. If you want to love God, you can't love what you don't know. Why don't you want to know? That should be a question that bothers people. You want to know the person who you're in love with. You want to know about your children. You want to know about your spouse, your husband or wife. Why don't you want to know about God? Because perhaps no one's really told you enough to excite your imagination and your intelligence, your intellect about him. But that's always the first thing you have to do. That coupled, the intellectual with the spiritual. You pray and you learn, and these two things go hand in hand. And as you're doing all of this, then you'll start to spot, wait a second, that's wrong. Wait, that's not right. That's only a half-truth. And when that happens, then whatever the particulars are of your individual circumstances, who's saying it, when's it being said, how's it being proposed, who's it being proposed to, you have to stand up and you have to defend the truth, period. Now, that doesn't mean you come swinging a sword like I probably would. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. I'm only kidding. Sort of. Maybe it does require that. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows? But it depends on what the individual circumstances are. But I heard a priest say in Mass one time, a priest said in Mass that there is no formal teaching of the Church on the perpetual virginity of Mary. Oh, Father, I'd like to show you the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You see right there, we do have a formal teaching about that. A priest didn't know that, or said he didn't know it. So you have to do what you have to do, and whatever it requires. We are all at the service of the truth, whatever it is. I wish I'd have known at Notre Dame when I was an undergrad what I know now. There'd have been hell for leather in those theology classes, let me tell you. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Diane, and I'm from Northville.
Hi, Diane.
Hi. I recently had a priest tell me that he had learned nothing in 4 years in seminary. Can you comment on the formation of priests in the past in the seminary?
Yeah, I can. I think a lot of the things you hear from priests, unfortunately, even in confession now, it has to really make you stop and think, could you move the grill back? Are you a Catholic priest in there? It's a little disturbing. It's a little disturbing to go in and tell a priest a sin and then hear it's not a sin. And, all of this corruption in Catholic education did not leave the seminaries untouched. An awful lot of craziness has gone on in seminaries over the last, 30 or so years, maybe 40 years or so. So, again, we are unfortunately, as Catholic laity and Catholic priests, clergy, we are unfortunately in a position of having to pay very close attention when somebody says something. I don't care if it's a bishop, I don't care if it's a priest or a nun or a brother or the director of religious education in the parish or the RCIA instructor. You have to listen, and that's why you have to know. So yeah, seminaries were not left untouched by this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, what's your name? Where are you from?
Hi, my name's Mary. I'm from Detroit.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. About 20 years ago, I was called in to take over a confirmation CCD class where the kids, 13-year-old kids, did not even know the Apostles' Creed or the Our Father.
The one I took over, they didn't even know there were 10 commandments.
Now it's this generation of people who are now coming out of the seminaries, and by some miracle of grace, a lot of these guys are coming out really Catholic. And I am wondering if you think that the horror you've been describing through this is going to be changed at the grassroots level by these priests coming out at the parishes.
You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. That's the answer.
Okay.
They will try, but they will fail. That's so reassuring, isn't it? It's so reassuring that no matter how much we screw it up through ignorance or malice or greed or whatever, in the end, he wins. Yeah. But I sure hope it doesn't look like this on the last day. Oh, Frankie, my boy.
Hello there, Mike. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm a proud product of 12 years of Catholic education. And in my high school, we actually learned apologetics, although back then it was just called defending the faith. But I've got a couple...
There are some places that remain faithful.
Got a couple quotations, one from the Old Testament. Actually, it's two places in the prophet Ezekiel. If I say to the wicked man, you shall surely die, and you do not warn him or speak out or to dissuade him from his wicked conduct so that he may live, the wicked man will die for his sin, but I will hold you responsible for his death. It's repeated twice in the prophet Ezekiel. And from the Gospel of St. Matthew, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. What does that say not only for the catechists, the religion teachers, but for the bishops, for the priests who don't speak out? I know I have a very good pastor, and we do learn the faith. We have good religious education director, and we study the Bible. The kids in the elementary school study the Bible. But what does it say to the kids and to these people responsible who don't take that responsibility seriously?
I don't think you need a degree in Greek or Hebrew to be able to translate that and come up with anything other than what it says. You should be terrified. You should be terrified if you have the soul of someone in your hands that's been entrusted to you because of a gift and a grace you've been given. And not only do you refuse to pass that grace and that truth and that gift on, but you take it away and you give them poison, and you got to stand in front of Almighty God one day. You know what? He's not going to like this very much. You have corrupted his teachings. What a disaster for that soul, for that person's soul. We really need to pray, and if you are faithful, it's on us. Like your first reading from Ezekiel there, the first passage from Ezekiel. It's on us to turn this around. Don't wait for somebody else. As a famous somebody once said, we are the change we've been waiting for.
Yeah, right.
You get what I'm saying? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Right back, right after this. Quick closing thought. If you are somebody who has fallen into this trap of sort of complacent teaching, being somebody who's just like, oh, yeah, kind of, I don't want to be invested, kind of a lukewarm thing. Stop and think about what you have in your hands. You have souls Almighty God has entrusted to you. Take those souls and give them back to God. Give them everything that you are supposed to give them. If God has put you in that position and you don't produce, that's not a good thing to be. Fight for the people of God. You fight for what you love, right? Nobody fights for something they don't love. Fight for what you love. Fight for the people of God. If you're a bishop or a priest or a brother or a sister or DRE or RCIA or Catholic school teacher or whatever it is, pick up that sword and remember what you're doing. You're fighting Satan, for God's sake. That's what you're doing. You're fighting Satan, the ancient enemy. And for those of us that have tried to remain faithful, our brothers and sisters that are not doing this right are not the enemy. It's our responsibility to bring them back too. We do not want the sword that Christ will bring back with him on Judgment Day to go against them. We want it to be thrust into Satan, as St. Michael does there in every depiction we have in the artwork of him. Pray for proper instruction and faithful teachers of the faith. And be one yourself. If you're a Catholic and you're not teaching the faith, then you are disobeying the first command that Christ gave us after he rose from the dead as he ascended to heaven. Go out and teach all nations, regardless the cost to yourself. That's what we are supposed to do. That's what we are charged to do. That's what we are commanded to do. That's our purpose for being here on earth, to get other people to heaven, no matter the cost to ourselves. Because whatever it costs us, we'll have the best deal that you could ever imagine.